countdown is on to this weekend's 2023 Monaco Grand Prix, a glamorous 78 laps of the Circuit de Monaco in Monte Carlo this Sunday. Racing around the Principality is always a highlight of the F1 calendar. So let's get up to speed on the big talking points ahead of this weekend. I'm Martyn Lee from the Autosport podcast, joined by Matt Q and Jake Boxall-Legge. Now, many teams are bringing upgrades to this race, and many of them should have been seen last weekend at Imola, obviously, given no race there, and obviously our thoughts continue with the work that continues in that area. Now, this is a unique circuit, being Monaco. Jake, you're our technical expert. Are the teams going to even bother bringing upgrades or save them for Barcelona, given they can learn a limited amount?
Well, that's always the dilemma when it comes to Monaco, because it's so different to every other circuit on the calendar. You want to bring your highest downforce package because you don't have the top speed to generate a lot of downforce from the floor. You've got to rely on a lot of upper body bits. But the thing is, when it comes to teams like Mercedes, because they were planning to bring their big update to Imola, it takes a lot more work for them to undo those changes, bring something a little bit more of a known quantity to Monaco, and then redo them in time for Barcelona. So they're going to stick with it, and they're going to stick with their changes. We're expecting new side pods to come in Monaco, and they're hoping that these changes are going to bring a little bit more balance to the car, that Lewis Hamilton and George Russell are just going to have a much more stable platform to work from, and hope it kind of undoes all of the wrongs that the W13 and the W14 have had. So for them, they're going to stick with it, and I think we'll probably see a few other teams following suit. We're expecting to see a new Alpine floor in Imola, so it remains to be seen whether we'll see that as well in Monaco, and there's a few other changes as well afoot. So it's going to be a very different Monaco. We're not going to see the status quo. We're going to see a few teams, making up for lost time that they lost in Imola.
Matt, we saw the news earlier this week about the Mercedes big campus announcement of their factories and the overhaul they're going to give that. And some people would say, well, that's nice, all that focus on off-track action, but don't they need to make their car a little bit quicker? But of course, this is a long-term project to bring the best and brightest minds to Mercedes and make sure they have the best possible working environment there. But what are you expecting to see from teams like Mercedes this weekend? Any teams bringing upgrades? What are you looking for specifically?
Well, as JBL said, it's a outlier, this track, the shortest track, one of the lowest average speeds, everything about aero efficiency, power unit potency, they're all mitigated massively in Monaco. And that means that when you have sort of such a massive upgrade, which is, as we're saying, on the top services, you'll see new side pods, but they've also at pains to say they've been developing suspension, because you know how uncomfortable Hamilton and Russell have been. It then becomes a really unusual circuit to validate that. So it'd be quite interesting to see how what their run plans are through free practice, which I know is not the most glamorous way to sell the most historic race on the calendar. It's going, oh, what do they do in practice? But I think that'll be, when you've got Hamilton and Russell, experienced operators, safe pairs of hands, who you don't expect to sort of smear it into the barriers, you expect those upgrades to last. And so seeing how they correlate. And although Monaco is that outlier circuit, if they bring a tenth of a second a lap time, it's worth it, regardless of if they're optimised to that track or not. Like you saw McLaren, who, okay, they haven't turned a massive corner, but the Baku upgrades, they said, well, they're not for Baku. Let's say they're worth 0.2 of a lap in Barcelona. Even if they're only worth half a tenth in Azerbaijan, they're not optimised for that track. It still brings a little bit of performance. So if they can bring themselves a bit closer in the mix, that'll be a good storyline to watch out for. But having said that, when the drivers are uncomfortable with the fundamental chassis, the way they sit, and this is a track that last year exposed weight problems, it always exposes a benign chassis. I'm expecting other teams, Aston Martin, whatever, Red Bull, to Ferrari even, to be probably more in the mix.
JBL, what about Red Bull's advantage, which we have seen in a straight line this season and more recently, which I always find it's still funny to talk about. You think about Red Bull in the blown diffuser era, it was anything but a straight line advantage, and now we talk about Red Bull. Where are they really strong? Well, it's when they open that DRS. Holy moly, they just fly. But of course, there's no long straights in Monaco. There will be a DRS zone, but what about Red Bull's aero advantage that so far has served them very well? We don't talk so much about the mechanical grip side of that Red Bull package, but do you think that aero advantage is nullified a little bit by racing this weekend at Monaco?
I think a little bit, and we definitely saw it last year as well, because Ferrari was the quicker car in qualifying, and it was through poor strategy and bad luck that Ferrari lost that race last year and that Sergio Perez won. So I think it will be mitigated again. Obviously, the Red Bull, as you say, is very, very good in the straight line. That DRS is very, very powerful, but it's also really, really strong in high-speed corners. That's just having got the floor absolutely spot on. It's having that stable balance with the suspension as well. So by the end of a long corner, this ability to just sort of keep building and building this downforce and do so efficiently, so that Red Bull, by the end of those high-speed corners, if you look at the GPS traces, they're very, very quick in that part. And so maybe in the lower speed corners, that's probably their Achilles heel, if there was to be one. And so that's going to really sort of add an interesting factor. I think it's the biggest chance for them to fall down this season. But having said that, they still won last year and executed the race perfectly. And if they can continue to do that, then it's not going to be a problem for them, and they'll find a way to do it. But it certainly bears thinking about.
And Matt, what about those teams looking to take the competition to Red Bull in terms of Ferrari and Aston Martin as well? Ferrari have been pretty handy at qualifying this year, but we saw last time out in Miami that particularly Aston Martin, they seem to really hook up that traction in the first third of that long straight in Miami, and then of course Red Bull and that DRS just kind of took over, and that's when Red Bull were really dominant. But Ferrari didn't really have an answer to Aston Martin's kind of low speed or out of those corner traction advantages at Miami. What are you expecting to see, or what will you be looking for as you go to report on this weekend's race in terms of those looking to take the fight to Red Bull, and who do you expect to have the chance to take advantage of that?
Well, Martin, thank you very much. What a fantastic segue for viewers to go to Autosport.com, where by this afternoon there'll be a GPS-based piece looking at those teams that can really take the fight to it. And I know in previous videos when we've done these, you've had to sort of drum up attention or try and build the hype. But I think there's good reason to. I know Fernando Alonso's line of argument is we need Red Bull to have a bad pit stop, bit of unreliability for us to feature here. But if you look at all the circuits so far, and I know it's an odd sample set because you've got bias towards street tracks, but not really street tracks in the case of Miami and Jeddah. But Alonso, over Stroll, over the rest of the field, is doing all the heavy lifting in the braking zone. So he's so late on the brakes, and as you say, able to pick up that throttle nice and early, and fundamentally has a good chassis there. So that means Aston Martin can potentially really feature significantly. Now, last night when I was looking to pack shorts or jeans, the weather forecast is pretty dismal for Monaco. So after not the most exciting races so far in 2023, a bit of inclement weather is probably welcome. Obviously not Imola levels, but so whether that then comes to mitigate the on-paper Aston Martin advantage remains to be seen. Ferrari's one is the drivers who complained about high tyre deck this season, and obviously Leclerc's crash in Miami just points to rear end stability, but they're through 4th, 5th, 6th gear corners. So when you've got an absence of those, obviously, not to play into stereotypes and what the internet want, but Leclerc doesn't need too much help sort of putting it in the barriers around Monaco. If he avoids that, the car, although this is not last season when Ferrari enjoyed the agility from being down at the weight limit compared to Red Bull, so that sort of, prowess in a tight, twisty corners has sort of been diminished somewhat. Their weaknesses, separate to them also bringing potentially a revised floor to help some of that rear end stability. So some of them should be disguised this end. So the optimist somewhere deep down inside of me says that Red Bull might have to sweat a little bit more to hook it up this weekend.
I would love nothing more than that fairy tale of Charles Leclerc finally getting a home victory, but I don't know. Let's wait and see. I'd love to see it, but I'm not sure that he's done with heartbreak in that circuit yet. Let's hope not. JBL, you are our indie man as well. I've been tapping you up for Indy 500 stuff, and you said, "Well, I can't do the post Indy podcast because I'm at Monaco." But you do follow IndyCar as well. McLaren, of course, at times were topping the timesheets. I think they qualified, was it 3rd and 5th in the end for the Indy 500. Looking strong, though. We won't be saying that about McLaren this weekend. You've touched on them a little bit. There's a livery reveal at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and hopefully they can bring more than just a new livery to Monaco. We also heard from Zach Brown earlier in the week, or maybe end of last week, that he thinks Oscar Piastri is a future world champion. Well, I'm not sure we've seen enough of him yet racing in Formula One to make that conclusion. But he says if they can deliver Lando Norris and Oscar the right car, then they have future world champions. What do you think McLaren's chances, JBL, are of bringing something half decent to this weekend?
Well, McLaren's biggest issue this season has been straight line speed. And if you look at Baku, for example, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were well over 10 kilometers an hour down on their rivals by the end of the straight. So they were sitting ducks, really. And that's been the case throughout the season. The car's just a little bit draggy and it's not particularly efficient. But as Matt said already, that kind of pales into insignificance when it comes to the Monaco weekend. And if the Baku updates are working, if they've had a chance to run them, kind of correlate them over the two races that they've been on the car, I see no reason for them not to have a slightly better weekend, because as we've said, the weaknesses are mitigated by the characteristics of the circuit. They're not going to reach the highs of their Indy 500 qualifying. I think they got all 4 cars into the top 9. They're sitting very, very pretty for the Indy 500, and I'm hoping that there's going to be a bar in Monaco or something that's going to show it, because if McLaren, let's say, don't have a particularly strong weekend in Monaco, they've got a lot of chance of getting something really good out of the Indy 500. So yeah, looking forward to seeing it.
Absolutely. Well, look, finally, before we go on this preview episode, Matt, they've been rumours flying around this week about Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, who I've mentioned already, spending £70 million on their new cafeteria and other associated buildings. Toto Wolff saying that they are looking to not just their Formula One competitors, but things like Silicon Valley and how they can become a tech centre to attract the best and brightest. And they don't come any better than Lewis Hamilton. Of course, he will want to keep his star man in that team if Lewis Hamilton wants to stay. But then we see stories, rumours flying around of €40 million a year for Hamilton to go and get some red overalls on and drive for Ferrari. Can it happen? Would it happen? Haven't Ferrari got a pretty harmonious lineup with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, unless they could perhaps lose Leclerc if he's not happy with the car that he is being given? I'm not sure I can ever see Lewis Hamilton stepping out of a Mercedes car. But what do you think?
Yeah, I'm fully with you, Martin. I get, the romanticism of Ferrari, and that is a fantastic headline. And, there may well have been talks. It doesn't have to be that, Hamilton's got a pen in his hand hovering over the dotted line. It can be that, there's been a round the back of the garage discussion saying, what if? But all the way through, ad nauseum now for years and years, Hamilton has said, I've had this relationship with Mercedes since karting. They're the only engine I've ever raced with in F1. I've remained loyal. And then that narrative has changed over the past 6 months, or evolved rather, to all I need to do is sit down with Toto Wolff, and then my new contract will be agreed in a minute. And that I want to, replicate Sterling Moss and be associated with the 3-pointed star until my dying days. And I feel that even if I lose a tenth or two as a driver, I can contribute to this team in some sort of management role, blah, 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 blah. So, I did stop and read the story, and who knows, it could happen. There could be a change of heart. Hamilton decides, well, I'm not going to win in Mercedes. I don't see enough there for whatever reason. Maybe I might as well not win in Ferrari, but whatever. But when you're not necessarily going to add to your legacy, but you're going to lose out on 40 years worth of company cars and free lunches and after dinner speeches, I think it's a nice rumor. But also Ferrari is rebuilding. You've got this hallowed Michael Schumacher, Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, Fry era. That wasn't, is hiring a super talented, and I know I'm saying this is Alonso's doing wonders at Aston Martin, but is hiring a 37-year-old the right person to galvanise another renewed team effort around, because you can't keep Leclerc happy. Maybe you focus on the guy that you've supported through the junior career and give him a car that he can handle. And if you're saying in the media he is capable of being a world champion, well, give him the tools to be that, rather than going and getting an even more expensive world champion who will still have the same sort of difficulties. So nice story, and it feels that, oh no, we've not had a Grand Prix, we need some headlines to keep us going till Monaco. It fills that role nicely, but I have my doubts about whether Hamilton will ever dress up in a Prancing Horse logo.
Absolutely. I can't see it happening. He's never leaving Mercedes. And even then, I can, as you say, I can see him taking on a role at Mercedes, and something that will keep him busy in his retirement. Well, that is our preview for today. We'd love to hear from you now. What do you think? Can Fernando Alonso get a win in 2023? And if he can, is this his best opportunity? Does it mean that whoever qualifies on pole this weekend is the inevitable winner, or will we see some Monaco drama? What do you think about those rumours of Hamilton racing in Ferrari colours? And who do you think is going to bring the best upgrades this weekend? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Then you can get all of our videos, and when we talk about the race reviews and the race previews that we do amongst everything else, you will be the first to know. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.